Let's talk about, is this the one that I want to watch?
Marjane Satrapi made no secret.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about Marjane Satrapi, who was an Iranian writer, cartoonist, filmmaker, activist, and has died at the age of 56. So let us learn about who she was and why her work was noteworthy.
Of her sadness on social media. Just over a year after the death of her husband, the man she called the love of her life, Marjane Satrapi, the Franco-Iranian artist died of a broken heart, according to friends, in Paris, having always wanted to return to her homeland of Iran.
No matter what happens, I must die in my country. I believe that you're born in a place, and for that cycle to be complete, you must die in that place. My body must become part of that land. So I will return there, even if I have to do it after death.
Born in 1969 to Marxist parents, Satrapi grew up in Tehran, struggling with restrictions imposed by Iran's Islamic leadership after the 1979 revolution. She studied fine arts and settled in France in 1994. In 2000, she published Persepolis, an autobiographical coming-of-age tale, chronicled in a monochrome comic book series, mixing political defiance with dark humor and a stripped-down visual style.
If there is a message, the message is that the human being is a human being, no matter where he comes from.
So she was born in Tehran and her parents were communists. And then the 1979 revolution happened. And at that point, she was 14, she was a preteen, and the revolution happens. Then the theocracy comes into power. And so her parents left, went to Vienna. So she spent her teen years in Europe. So she was dealing with a lot, not just as a young Iranian girl who was experiencing changes in her home country, and how her family, who had communist ties, were affected by the social and political changes in Iran. But also then when she was living in Europe, there were new challenges that included racism and a lack of a cohesive cultural identity, feeling torn between these two worlds, and also isolation and loneliness. So she created and published this graphic novel, Persepolis, and it's gone on to become one of the most acclaimed graphic novels of all time. And it was an autobiographical story of her childhood and then her transitional teenage years. So she wrote it in French because her explanation was that she wanted Western people to have a different perspective from what they had from the version distorted by Western media and governments. The version that they had, she wanted to offer a different, more authentic perspective. Persepolis would be a good film study movie. Yes. So then the graphic novel ended up becoming a film. And she wanted to display the Iranian people as complex, diverse, real living human beings, which in the West, Iranian people are used as a tool, either a tool to push this narrative that they need to be freed, they need to be liberated from their evil government, or a tool for pushing these racist viewpoints in the West to justify violence that is done to Iranians and other people in the broader region. So either way, still a one-dimensional tool, not allowed to be the narrators in their own lives. And props, yeah, political props, just depending on who it is, the prop may be used in differentiating ways. So she, rather than write Persepolis in Farsi, wrote it in French to provide that perspective for a Western audience.
Adapted Persepolis for the big screen in 2007, earning her the jury prize at the Cannes Film Festival. 5 more films followed, although she said making movies had never been an ambition of hers.
Usually, film adaptations of books aren't great. And when the author adapts their own work, it's a disaster. I was convinced I was going to make the worst film in the world, but at the same time, a little voice inside me was saying, "You're being paid to learn a new trade." That's the only way I got started. It wasn't a dream at all, but I realized that cinema is a machine for creating compassion and empathy.
An outspoken critic of Iran's theocratic government, she lent her voice to the Women Life Freedom movement after the 2022 death of Mahsa Amini. Satrapi turned down the Legion of Honor in 2025 because of what she described as France's hypocritical attitude towards Iran. Her native...
And I think, I think it's complicated because there is always the valid concern that somebody who has written something that is very popular with a Western audience and whose work is being promoted by Western institutions, that person is, even if they don't intend to be, is used as a prop. And certainly there were criticisms of Marjane that her work was used as a tool by Western institutions and governments to further advance their claims that the Iranian people needed to be liberated from the from the theocratic, authoritarian, repressive government that they were living under. Marjane did not intend for her work to be used as Western propaganda, and instead wanted to offer Westerners a perspective that was unlike what they would have gotten from the distorted version from Western media. And she absolutely did not believe that Western forces, that in Western imperialism should be the solution to Iranians fighting back against government repression.
Country which you would never see again.
It was absolutely used that way for readers like myself. It was a work that taught me that people deserve liberation on their terms and not the terms of imperial states. Because here's the thing. There's a difference between, say, the type of Iranian in diaspora who would be promoted on Fox News talking about, yeah, we need the Shah, or we need, please, Israel and US, free my people, free my people. Difference between that and somebody who is writing on their childhood and experiences dealing with a repressive government and advocating for true liberation for their people. Because we're not going to sit here and pretend like the Iranian government is not repressive, but we're also not going to sit here and pretend like Israel and the United States are the true liberators, that they're, these beautiful examples of democracy, this is what we should model Iran after. And the US and Israel need to get involved because Iran is so bad. So I thought that this was a good piece on this issue here. Marjane Satrapi and the Orientalism debate. The death of Marjane Satrapi this week has revived a debate about the political reception of the Iranian cartoonist, writer, artist, and filmmaker, whose memoir Persepolis became one of the most acclaimed graphic novels ever published. Tributes have poured in from around the world, but alongside the spirited praise came a wave of criticism from detractors who accused Satrapi of Orientalism, arguing that her work helped entrench Western stereotypes about Iran and Muslim women. The disagreement reveals something larger than just the legacy of a single author or creator. For over 2 decades, Persepolis has served as a flashpoint in a broader debate over how non-Western cultures are narrated to the world. When Persepolis first appeared in France as a 4-volume series released between 2000 and 2003, it was hailed as a breakthrough. Drawing on her own experiences of growing up in Tehran during the 1979 revolution, the memoir follows a rebellious young protagonist named Marji who is navigating political upheaval and eventually exile. Its humorous tone offered readers a glimpse into an Iran that did not exist in the charged coverage of hostage crises, nuclear threats, and the so-called axis of evil. Iranian women were frequently portrayed as either faceless victims or ideological fanatics, and Satrapi presented them as more complicated, politically engaged, complex, funny, and flawed. Satrapi's own parents were leftists, and her beloved uncle Anush was executed by the state for his communist associations. Satrapi often spoke about her family, joked, argued, and mourned to endure the harsh rule of the Islamic Republic. Likewise, the book's success rested on its ability to render Iranians not as strange symbols, but as relatable people. Yet in recent years, a growing number of scholars and commentators have argued that Persepolis belongs to what some described as a neo-Orientalist tradition. Their criticism is mainly that the book and film's popularity in North America and Europe can't be separated from the political context in which it emerged. Because it was published in the years surrounding the War on Terror, the argument goes, Persepolis offered a picture of Iran that fit too comfortably within Western assumptions about authoritarian Islam and women's oppression. Some have portrayed Satrapi as a native informer akin to Afghan-American novelist Khaled Hosseini, whose novel The Kite Runner became a staple of the post-9/11 literary canon, but was also criticized by some commentators for presenting Afghanistan in a similar way. These critics argue that Satrapi's work has been absorbed into broader narratives that have been used to justify sanctions and foreign interference aimed at regime change in Iran. But these critiques are not without their critics. Many scholars have argued that Persepolis actually achieved the opposite of what its detractors claim. Rather than reducing Iran to a caricature, it complicated stereotypes by foregrounding political and ideological diversity and class differences. Cultural critic Nagar Motahedeh, whose 2019 book Whisper Tapes examines the American feminist writer Kate Millett's engagement with the Iranian Revolution and the debate that it occasioned, and told New Lines that Satrapi's memoir depicts a society united in opposition to the Shah, but deeply divided over what should follow, producing an abundance of divisions and factions that is hardly stereotypical, a departure from the monochrome portrait of the 1979 revolution as purely Islamic in character. Others have pointed out that Satrapi's target was never Iran as a culture, but rather political authoritarianism. Far from glorifying the West, her work and public stances repeatedly critique Western interference. In a 2012 talk, Satrapi dismissed simplistic notions of an East-West divide altogether, arguing that the real divide in the world is between fanatics and everyone else. More than a decade later, she declined France's Legion of Honor, citing her principles and attachment to her birth country, while rejecting the hypocritical attitude of France toward Iran. And see, I think there is more of an argument to be made that she was purposefully a tool for Western imperialism and for Western propaganda, had she not publicly rejected things like this very prestigious honor because of France's actions in Iran and their, the problems with France that she believed made them a hypocrite in decrying the issues of repression in Iran. So essentially, it's complicated because on the one hand, a person who has experienced repression under their government should get to speak about their experiences and the experiences of those around them in advocating for liberation, but also how, of course, that can be used by the state, by this, by the United States, for example, as a way to justify imperialist action in a place like Iran. So how somebody can be cynically used as a prop, as a tool, when in actuality, they are not advocating for somebody to come in under the false pretenses of liberation when it is anything but. Uma, thank you for the raid and thank you for the prime. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Even Vio has said Iranians aren't a monolith and they are sick of seeing people speak for them. I always use the example of Jafar Panahi, who's an amazing Iranian filmmaker who has been targeted by the state for his political dissidence and for his films. His films have been banned. He has been jailed. He has been targeted. And yet he continues to create work that is aimed at being an honest, authentic portrayal of the people who actually the very real people who live in Iran and the fight for freedom that they should be the ones fighting for, because they are the ones who actually want liberation. It is not these outside forces who use them as a prop, who use them as like faceless, nameless blobs to justify also the violence that is done to them from said outside forces. In the same way that here in the United States, as we are standing up against authoritarian power, as we are standing up against the many instances daily of power abuses, this is our fight. This is our fight. And so somebody who creates a piece of work that is reflective of those experiences and is aimed at showing a more complex portrayal here, that can, you can't stop somebody from using that to try and cynically weaponize it in their goals. But that does not mean that we don't have the right as people who are experiencing this for ourselves, that this is our reality, to tell our stories. Now, obviously, the difference here is United States versus Iran, but just to kind of offer explanation as to why Satrapi's work has been criticized, but also that I believe her intentions were never to have her work and her voice be weaponized by the United States government and Western institutions to advocate for intervention and imperialism in her home country. There's a difference between making propaganda and representing your complex and messy struggle for liberation. Satrapi herself consistently rejected the idea that she was attempting to explain an entire country. Her goal, she said, was much smaller and more personal. If audiences came away viewing Iranians as human beings rather than as abstract categories like terrorists or Islamic fundamentalists, she considered it an accomplishment. Satrapi spoke very much from her own personal experience, but it also was representative of the experience of so many Iranians. Nahid Siamdoust, the author of Soundtrack of the Revolution, The Politics of Music in Iran, and a contributor to these pages, told New Lines. Siamdoust argues that the critique itself is Orientalist because it doesn't afford Iranians or an Iranian like her the right to represent herself freely of those kinds of considerations of that Western gaze. Hey, Caroline, it's my B-Day and just came back from seeing Obsession. What a great way to spend your birthday. I hope you're having a good one. Thank you for the 7 months and happy birthday. Reminds me of Waiting for Snow in Havana, an autobiography of the author as a child during and after the Cuban Revolution that, despite lacking any support towards the U.S., was taught to me as how the Cuban Revolution destroyed Cuban society. Sometimes the state can co-opt the purpose of an author and be weaponized in the direct opposite action, direct opposite direction. Yes. And I think because of how much Western institutions do this, it causes a reaction in people that is coming from a place of cynicism, but also of the reality that this is done all the time. But you have to separate someone's intentions from how that work is cynically weaponized. And it's not to say that someone can have better intentions than the way that the work is used and that there's still problems with that. But it's like, okay, here's maybe not it's an example of how The Matrix, which is an allegory for the trans experience, has been co-opted by the right, and the whole red pilling is now synonymous with right-wing internet culture. It's not a perfect example to use here, but I think as a woman too, you should, as an Iranian woman, you should be allowed to talk about repression that you have experienced, a lack of true freedom under your government, and not be accused every time of feeding into Western narratives that are a way to take agency actually from Iranian women by claiming that they need to be saved. So this requires nuance, because we need to recognize that, first of all, there are ways that Iranian women are succeeding in society that Western women are not. Like when we talk about education rates, when we talk about women in STEM in Iran, like it's not black or white here, but also that there are Iranian women, secular Iranian women, who are forced into doing things that violates their freedom. And so somebody like Satrapi, who really, really advocated for freedom of expression and true feminism, should be allowed to do that without these very kind of cynical accusations that she is promoting the Western narrative that the West needs to save Iranian women from their government. Her book was about the beliefs being forced on them and the religious belief that not the average Muslim person. Yes, she was not anti-Muslim or anti-Islam. She was against theocracy, and she was against the extremism of religion.
Marjane Satrapi.
Okay, wait, we just watched that. Here's an interview with her.
Movieweb.com.
Well, the story is based on your real-life experiences growing up in Iran and Austria and France. And is this movie 100% autobiographical, or is this a fictional story inspired by your ordeals growing up?
I think the second thing is better put, because, you know, it's certainly not a documentary about my life. And it's certainly a subjective point of view. And it's certainly that when you make a script, you know, the part of the storytelling, we should never forget it. So if I pretend that is 100% autobiographical, that means that the dog looks like the dog that I draw, that this thing that I said, exactly I said this thing, which is not true. Of course, is a part of storytelling. It's based on my own experiences. And then, you know, you have to make a story. I think even documentaries, they are part fictional. As soon as you make a story, you have to have some fiction. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And what inspired you to create the Persepolis graphic novels?
Well, you know, that was really my answer to the word, because, you know, the two times that I left Iran in '84 and in '94, I heard so many crazy things about my, you know, Iran. You know, people, they were saying things, and I was like, this is not like this is not like that. And, you know, that is a truth, a reality that you see on the TV channel, that I don't say it doesn't exist, it does. But that is many other realities that we never see. So, you know, that was really to say.
And with every religion, you find the same extremists. Yeah. And the problem becomes when Westerners view religious extremism in, say, Islam, and view that as singularly bad, and don't acknowledge, say, how Christian nationalism drives American politics, of how there is so much religious repression, repression resulting from religion here in the democratic, you know, the democratic United States of America. And so that is a major fucking frustration, where they will point to, Westerners will point to, say, a law requiring women to wear a hijab in public, and go, repression, religious repression, Islam is bad, see? Rather than the problem being with extremism and theocratic power in a state, and then will still have a superiority due to being a person living in the West, despite the fact that in the last 5 years, just in the last 5 years, we have seen some of the most detrimental blows to autonomy here in the States, that we have seen a rollback on progress that we made 40 fucking years ago.
This, I will give you at least another point of view. It's a very personal one. It just engaged my own person, but this is it. And so that was the beginning, how I started it. And of course, you know, I wrote it 5 years after I left Iran the second time, because, you know, I needed to have distance with the story. I didn't have to be angry anymore. I didn't have to have any violence in me anymore. Because, you know, you cannot answer to the stupidity by stupidity. You cannot answer to the violence by violence. So it's extremely important to take a step back and look at the thing. So that is what I tried to do, and that was the reason I made it in the first place.
Now, how did the graphic novels then turn into a movie?
Well,
and let me just say, I am not Iranian. I do not have the, you know, I do not have the superior grasp here, the viewpoint here that should be considered the one to, like, oh, listen to. I guess I'm just trying to offer a little perspective here with this problem of taking work that is aimed at a Western audience in order to try and offer them a different perspective from the media that they traditionally have consumed that is so distorted and very one-sided, and how, yes, that then because of the intended audience being for the West, it can be weaponized. And it's so it's complex is what I'm trying to say. And I don't think that it's entirely fair to dismiss Marjane Satrapi's work as to dismiss her work as being intentionally Orientalist, or if not intentionally, that she didn't have a problem with it being used to further these Western narratives. American evangelicals will condemn the death penalty for homosexuals in Muslim nations, all the while lobbying for and celebrating the death penalty for homosexuality in Christian nations like Uganda. Or yeah, and just totally ignoring hate crimes that happen here in the US. It's like all the pink washing. Oh, they would throw you off a rooftop in Gaza. Meanwhile, trans people are being killed in the United States. Trans people are being targeted by American politicians.
It was a mess because I never wanted to do that, and I always thought it was a very bad idea. I still do. That, you know, it's not because you are a good cartoonist that you become a good movie maker, and that's not because something works, you know, as a comic that it.
Yeah, isn't Fox News' latest smear is Hassan is homophobic? I'm like, well, watch out. He's going to actually have a lot more supporters now from your audience. They're like, wait a sec. This Muslim guy is homophobic? Maybe I actually like him.
As a movie. But knowing that was very good because I knew the danger of the project, that you shouldn't make an adaptation. We had a transposition. We have to really make an adaptation. That means forgetting about the book, taking the material and turn it into a cinematographic language. But I made it because a friend of mine wanted to become a producer, and you know, and I was like, you know, I want to work with my best friend Vincent, and I want the studio in Paris, and I want this, and I want that, and I want Catherine Deneuve. And he said, yeah, okay. And then I was like, shit, now I have to do it. So that is how it started.
You know, I found this film very insightful in providing a perspective from an everyday Iranian's point of view, which is not common in film. Was that the point, to get a woman's point of view who lives in Iran?
It's not a woman or a man, you know. The fact is that I am a woman. I mean, if I was not a woman, I would be a man. It is a very personal point of view. Since I didn't want that to become a political or historical or sociological statement, I had to write it in my name. I had to put it on my name. It happens that I'm a woman, but it's a human point of view. And really, if there is one message in this movie, is the humanistic message, is that human being anywhere is the same, and they have the right to live because they have dreams, because they have love, because they have parents and kids, and the life of all of us worth something. And then we have to understand that the situation is not as easy as we think.
I'm looking online to see. Yeah. Satrapi was not producing My Country Yearns for Freedom slop. She was humanizing Iranians as a complex cosmopolitan society to a foreign liberal audience at the height of the war on terror. And I understand. I understand the fears that somebody who is portraying a portrait of life in a state with people that have been so heavily caricatured and that in the West, because of Western imperial interests, they benefit from they benefit from Western people's believing these narratives of repression, but repression as dictated to them by Western governments and institutions, so that they will have no problem with violence that is done to the people in these regions. So I understand the fear of like, okay, your average Westerner, not even average, like Westerners thinking of women in Iran in hijab or totally covered head to toe, and that every single one of them yearns to be free of that, and that means that these benevolent Western governments are doing the right thing in going over to these areas and in pursuit of regime change. Okay. But it's more complicated than that, because as I said, the savior revisionist narrative, right? Because not everything okay, how do I want to say this? So that is still, though, I think centering the West, and specifically America, I'll say, in everything, by saying that every person's work that is, for example, like Marjane Satrapi's, that it is a tool for Western propaganda, rather than it being allowed to exist as a complex portraiture of this life that someone like Marjane lived and experienced, and her feelings towards that, which are separate from the belief that outside forces need to do something about it. Like missionaries saving godless people in a faraway land when it's really colonization and imperialism, tale as old as time. So here's an example from Persepolis. This is
woman with the shoulder bag, please stop running. I repeat, the woman with the shoulder bag, stop running. Hey, you, stop where you are.
Mind telling us why you're running, sister?
Because I'm late. I have class in 5 minutes.
But you can't run like that, miss. When you run, your rear end jiggles. It's what you call immodest.
Well, then stop staring at my butt! This is ridiculous. She looks the same from every angle.
So this is interesting because you can see how someone living in the West who actually has no understanding that Iranian women and girls do go to school, that they are highly educated, that they work, would see this and go, "Oh, wait a second. They go to school? Wait. They get education." Whereas what Marjane is drawing attention to here, her critique, is that the hypocrisy of religious extremism, where she's like, you're looking at my butt and complaining that I'm not behaving modestly enough, and that she should, ultimately, if she doesn't want to wear hijab, should not have to wear hijab as dictated by her government.
We're studying anatomy, and all we can see is her enormous beak.
All students must report immediately to the main assembly hall. Those who fail to attend will be suspended for 2 weeks.
It is our obligation and our duty to behave appropriately. It is from the blood of martyrs that the flowers of our revolution have blossomed. To behave shamelessly is to trample on the blood of all those who sacrificed their lives for our freedom. That is why I ask all the women present here today to refrain from wearing wide-legged pants and makeup, and to begin wearing longer headscarves that cover their hair entirely. If there are no questions, the meeting is adjourned. Yes?
You say that our veils are too short, that our pants are indecent, that we wear makeup, etc., etc. As an art student, most of my time is spent in the workshop. In order to draw, I need to be able to move freely. A longer headscarf would make it all the more difficult. You also criticize us for wearing wide-leg pants, even though they hide our curves effectively. But knowing these pants are in style right now, I pose a question. Is religion concerned with protecting our modesty, or is it just opposed to fashion? Your criticism is always directed at women, but what about our brothers? They're allowed to dress as they please. Sometimes they wear clothing so tight you can see their underwear. I just don't understand why, as a woman, you don't think I'd be affected by the sight of men in skin-tight pants, yet you're worried they'll get turned on by a few less inches of veil?
Marjane Satrapi
There's a
made
difference of when it is a choice and when it is forced. Yes. And at the end of the day, it's about the people, not the government. And so in advocating for the people, you are not, by virtue of that, advocating for someone else to come in and do something about your government. This is the thing about revolution and about liberation and fighting for equality, for social and economic equality, is that you believe it is in the hands of the people. It is not any institution that should come in, and certainly not in the West, come in as some savior here because of how, one, that is absolutely not what their true intentions are, and two, because it is in the hands and should be in the hands of the people to shape their society into what will best improve everyone's lives. It's people who need to create that change. Yeah, and it's all about having sovereignty. And so one of the first ways that you are denied freedom and that is when you are denied sovereignty, is when you are told that actually, no, somebody else is going to come in and handle things here. Non-intervention and cooperation without subordination. Yeah. And look, my position is that you cannot say that there is freedom if something is being imposed. So for people who are religious, as long as that is a choice, in the same way that being non-religious is a choice, and then for those who are religious, having the freedom to choose what they wish to adhere to is what the conversation should be. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is because of how demonized Islamophobia is, because of how demonized Islam is and how prevalent and normalized and institutionalized Islamophobia is, there seems to be this hesitation from Western leftists to draw any attention to to repression that occurs within within Islamic states. And the problem is not with Islam. The problem is all religious extremism and repression that results from said religious extremism. Liberation that is denied, autonomy that is denied because of religious extremism, and that extremism being carried out through governmental power. Not just Western leftists, it's the West all across. Well, the reason that I say Western leftists is because though that's the group of people who is more likely to have the best position here, which is that you are anti-intervention, anti-imperialism, anti-militarism, anti-colonization, anti-occupation, the West going in and changing out, doing coups, doing everything that they do. But Western leftists who then take that to mean that, and also Western leftists who are more likely to call out Islamophobia because of how normalized Islamophobia is in liberal institutions. Leftists, the American left, is the political force that is more likely to identify and call out how normalized Islamophobia is. And the continuation of these caricatures and stereotypes that leads to so much of the Western, the Western public having a very one-sided view of these, of places like Iran. This is like a comparison I make. It's with decolonization movements. People turn their head at places like Algeria who are fighting for independence and instead were like, it needs to be given benevolently by your colonizers. So many states who were given independence were roped into predatory relationships with their former colonizers or were sabotaged, i.e. the Congo. No one gives change out of the goodness of their heart. Hence, there is no bombing the Iranians to freedom. Right. No one is handing freedom to you. You fight for freedom. The silence from Democrats when Muslim colleagues and candidates are attacked as a cancerous rot.
On the House floor, two different Republicans basically call my sister Rashida a terrorist for nothing more than being there, being Palestinian, being a Muslim, being a woman. And it isn't just her, right? We've been seeing anti-Muslim attacks almost daily now. Just candidates who have done nothing more than their civic duty of running, of trying to serve their communities, from Dr. Hamawi, who is literally a veteran who has literally saved lives, including the life of a U.S. senator, who even he is being called a terrorist. Just the anti-Muslim rhetoric is picking up. And we don't often talk about how dangerous that is. And we also don't talk about how dangerous it is to our coalition. As the Democratic Party, we are supposed to be the ones that are the standard setters, the ones who are fighting for justice and equal opportunity and liberation. And if we aren't able to speak up against this right now, then how can we continue to hold that particular mantle? And, and it's not just Republicans who are, dealing in this. I've heard Democrats use and deal in some of the worst tropes and stereotypes of our Muslim colleagues, right? We watch this every day. So I just wanted to come on to say that if we are serious about fighting back against fascism and fighting back against authoritarianism, then we have to be very morally clear right now. Whether you are Muslim or Black or trans, there are easy targets on our communities. And honestly, for a lot of people, it pays for them to pick fights with these marginalized populations. No, literally, they raise money off of it. But I know that we shouldn't be ones who are complicit through our silence. We definitely shouldn't, turn around and act like we don't hear it when we know what has happened. But I can tell you that whether it's Rashida or Ilhan or anybody else, no marginalized person should have to deal with the abuse that they are dealing with daily from the White House on down.
The other thing too is that these racists will look at women in a place like Iran and go, ugh, they are forced into these things because of their repressive, evil government, yada, yada. But then for Muslim women in the United States, Muslim women like Frogan was born in Michigan. Frogan is American. Frogan chooses to be hijabi. That is her choice. That is her right. And yet the daily disgusting Islamophobic attacks that she experiences is proof that the problem is not with the forced actions from a repressive government. The problem they see is in the hijabi because of the deeply racist associations that they have. So they are in effect stripping Frogan of her agency while saying that they believe in freeing Iranian women and freeing Muslim women over there. And no, the reality is that they're racist. They're Islamophobic. That's what it is.
By themselves. So I just really hope that we can be as clear about
it. Yeah, remember who was it that was attacking Rama and was like being so crazy about the 1-inch little strip of skin that she was showing because her shirt was pushed. Same woman who the fuck was it? She was like going Naomi, not the good Naomi, bad Naomi. Naomi Wolf, who was being so creepy in her comments on Rama's outfit and was like, isn't it supposed to be modest? Where it's like, what is it the fuck that you want? Is it that you don't want women in hijabs because they're being repressed? Or that now they're not being modest enough because they have a little bit of skin showing because their shirt was pushed up? What is it? See, what it is they're just fucking Islamophobic. They're just racist.
Anti-Muslim hate as we are about all the other forms of hatred that we're fighting back right now, and recognizing that our liberation is tied together. So whether you are Black or brown or Muslim or Jewish, right now, attack against one is an attack against each and every one of us. And the more quiet they can make us be, we're giving them consent to eventually come around and do the same thing to us, or come around and do the same things to the people that we love. So I hope that people will join us and not stand for it. And it shouldn't just be progressives, and it shouldn't just be other Black people or brown folks who are speaking out, right? This is a battle for each and every one of us. This is a moral rot that we are dealing with. And I hope that we will not stand by and let this particular hatred grow and grow until it's out of our control.
Summerlee, goated. Here's an exchange that I want to take a look at. Kev June is Iranian, and their perspective is one that I really value and have learned a lot from. So Sturgeon's Law posted about Marjane Satrapi in response to people dismissing her work as Western propaganda slop. She opposed the Western-backed coup, the monarchy, Western wars, and sanctions on Iran, for example. Do you think it's ironic that in the face of American threats, you almost find yourself defending the Iranian regime? Absolutely. But if we want a democracy, the Iranian people have to do it themselves. The Americans say they want democracy in Iran, and at the same time, when the Iranians wanted to become democratic in 1953 with Mohammad Mossadegh and to nationalize our oil, the CIA came and made a coup d'etat in my country. Why do you want me to believe that they want to come and make a democracy? We have to make our democracy. There are many things that I wish for in my country. I want my country to be free. I want my country to be democratic. I don't want journalists to go to jail because of an article they wrote in my country. But if the United States of America attacked my country, no matter what, I would be against the United States. Kev June said, I don't know who they were responding to. I don't know. Not entirely convinced these people have actually read Persepolis or know much about it beyond a few posts. Celebrating her death is weird. I did read Persepolis, though, and it was frustrating to see, this is someone else, see anecdotal evidence being used as some sort of ultimate truth about Iran during a ridiculous, tumultuous time. It's a story that's definitionally how stories are told, anecdotally. Of course, hence they shouldn't be extrapolated to this extent to paint an entire society in said anecdotal experience. I know of countless people who grew up during that time and weren't fans. Should we take their positive experiences of that era and just frame post-revolutionary Iran in that light? No, they should be treated as a point of view, which is what Satrapi offered, a complicated one, in my opinion. And she actively fought the propagandification of her work. You are entitled to not like her work, but to reduce it to Western propaganda when it explicitly isn't is just silly. And I think she was clear in that she was not writing to represent an entire country, that it was not her perspective was the Iranian perspective. Her perspective was a perspective of an Iranian person. It's a work about her experience. Like, where did she say she was writing to represent every Iranian? She didn't, and explicitly said, I am not writing to explain every Iranian. So I'm not saying that there's not legitimate criticisms, but it's much more complicated than, in my opinion, being reduced to Western propaganda slop. And I've seen quite a few people be pretty nasty in the wake of her death, like almost celebrating the fact that she died, which is really vile. I mean, ultimately, I think there are people who read Persepolis, and it was the first time that they read a perspective that depicted Iranians as people. You know, I think when you are, say, a high schooler in America, you probably had no understanding of Iran outside of maybe whatever your parents would repeat based on what they listened to from the news, from the media. So a lot of people read Persepolis probably for the first time in high school. And it was for many of them, it was their first experience with seeing Iranians as people. It's weird because there are a lot of live Iranian filmmakers that are Western propagandists, like that fuck-ass AI. Yes, that fuck-ass AI slop. That very clearly it's not just that it's AI slop, it's that it's clearly Western propaganda because of the ending of that trailer with the fighter jets overhead and the Iranians being like, hopefully I'll make it through to see this revolution. And if not, I hope you all enjoy the liberation. Sorry to interrupt a serious topic, but you were great on When About It. Thank you. I think we need to do better, can do better, not bombing coordinates. But we're truly bombing the people. Yeah. And that's part of the problem, is that when so much of the focus is on the government, it erases the lives of the people, and they are just used. They are this faceless, nameless monolith that the West will point to and go, we need to liberate them, but never actually pay attention and offer up offer up the people's, the perspective from the actual people who live there. And instead, they're just this blob that is utilized as a prop itself. Having read it, and as an Iranian person, my feel was it humanized some Iranians to humanize others. If nothing else, it at least showcased the duality and heterogeneity of perspectives. Yeah, I definitely think it's a complicated portraiture, and it's not as simple as just saying, in either direction, good or bad. And it's an autobiography. And it's a piece of it's an autobiography that's expressed in the form of a graphic novel, which graphic novels really evolved after Alan Moore, who's the creator of V for Vendetta and Watchmen. And graphic novels evolved to become this medium that more complex social and political topics could be explored. And there was a freedom in the graphic novel being a vehicle for exploring those topics. There's definite irony to how liberals are like, listen to Iranians. Wait, no, not those ones. Yes, specifically Iranians who are like rich diaspora ones in Los Angeles who are like, we love the Shah. We have our BMW covered in pictures of the Shah and the monarchy, or ones in Florida who are on Fox News. Anyway, all right. I hope that was a productive conversation. If you came in with feelings towards this author and artist, or if you didn't know anything about Marjane, I hope that felt productive.